not unforgettable, which is what our co-host is. Welcome back to our co-host, by the way, Mr. Ash. We had to send about an APB there, an all-points bulletin to find her. But,
sit back.
The sheriff out in Maricopa County turned her up at some bar out there, and so here she is back. Judy K., while you were gone, I had an unusual episode at the home. A little lady, a blue-haired lady. You have to watch those good old blue-haired ladies out there. And she remonstrated me about talking too much on Viewpoint.
Oh, you're teasing me.
No, would I tease you? Of course not. And the thrust of it is that I wouldn't let that nice Tim Serby, who's a favorite of hers. Of course, Tim's a favorite of all those folks out there. He was administrator for a number of years. But anyway, I wouldn't give him any airtime to talk about Snow White and the Dwarfs. No, it's Beauty and the Beast.
It's another outfit, another union.
Why don't you take a little time and talk about Beauty and the Beast?
I'd like
don't
to.
look my direction either while you're doing that. Or
You can look
Henry's direction and take your gun from there. Go right ahead, please.
Well,
and welcome back.
Here it comes this very day, and it's going to be at the Earl C. Hargrove Chapel out on the grounds of Lincoln
Christian University.
LCU, right. Mm-hmm. It's the 20th through the 23rd at 7:30 in the evening and a 2 o'clock matinee on Saturday. And the ticket prices are adult $15 and students. I want my great-granddaughter to go. She's 10, and she isn't through college yet. She's very bright, but she hasn't completed college. And they're only $10, and it's Beauty and the Beast, and anybody of any age would love it. And it's got lots of LCU students in it and lots of community actors, and it's well worth your time. 7:30 evenings, 2 o'clock on Saturday, and it's Beauty and the Beast.
Directed
at
by
LCU.
a young man. Directed by a young man from Mount Pulaski, who's in their fine arts department over at Mount Pulaski High School, and he's a director of Beauty and the Beast.
Is that right?
Yes. Mr. Serby is acting as an advisor. The set is being built by Mike Higgins, and Mike is a very talented young man. Mike goes up to Indiana often, where has involved with the theater and the round up there.
Oh, yeah?
And he constructs sets, theater sets, and that's his expertise. So we're glad to have the opportunity to talk about that.
I bet you were glad I was gone and you got to be with Tim Serby.
Well, it was a tough he's such a magnetic personality, and there Casper Milktoe sat back here in the corner, worried about what to say next. but we muddled through somehow.
Oh, he's such a nice man.
So, this morning, we have with us a gentleman who has been on air with Viewpoint before, a gentleman for whom those who know him have a great deal of esteem. Henry Johnson's been in our community quite a while. Henry's last employment
well over 40
was
years.
At the Illinois Department of Corrections with the mantle of chaplain.
Yes.
Am I correct on that, sir?
You are.
And it occurred to me that you've had a number of experiences out there, some of which you can share and some of which you can't share. But it's another avenue of life that you interact with on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. How long were you chaplain out there, Mr. Johnson?
28 years.
Boy,
that's a long time.
Oh,
I bet you've heard some stories that'd curl your hair.
Well, it certainly broke my heart.
Yes.
I'm sure that's good. Yeah.
Many,
but you see, some of them are manufactured, and you know that.
Oh, well.
Yeah, there's the generic, well, I didn't do it. I'm innocent, as an excuse for
sure.
why they think they should not be in prison. But in my counseling, I talk with individuals who were destined to come to prison because of their dysfunctional family life. Mm-hmm. And it just struck me as, no one's really born in prison. but there are many people who are on that track because of a broken family, in the sense that there's no father and positive role model. It's very abusive. Poverty, of course, is a factor, and that goes across the board in our society. No matter where the prison is, it's going to be filled with primarily the disenfranchised or the marginalized, or people who just come from difficult circumstances. Not always, but very often.
But in your capacity as chaplain, it's just inexorable that you would be the recipient of a lot of these stories, and some stuff not in your back and made up, which just made it sound like poor little me, when the truth of the matter is the guy was a downright scallywag and deserved to be where he was.
Oh yeah, there are people that we definitely need to throw the key away on. Yeah, and that's across the board. Yeah.
Is it, in the final analysis, is it more often just punitive, or is it more often correctional?
Well, certainly, when I was working, the philosophy, and so for one warden in particular, he would say all of the time that programs are good security. And so he pushed education, recreation, religious life, because it gave the inmate a sense of importance and meaning, and it kept their minds focused on positive things rather than negative things. So our programs, many years that I worked there, were geared towards helping the inmate go out better than they came in. And we provided basic education. If they didn't finish high school, they had a GED opportunity. Higher.
Is that a common condition?
Oh, for many. I don't know the exact statistics, but they had to test up to a certain grade level. If they did not, I think it was like third grade, then they had to take GED courses, and then had opportunities to go on to college. And so, and I've taught in those programs, and so has my wife Ida. Taught in the program. She has had the opportunity to take English and writing skills and African American literature. I've had the opportunity to teach sociology, psychology, history of the African American church, philosophy of religion. And you can lock the body up, but you cannot lock up the human spirit and the human mind. And you would be amazed at just the learning capacity of the people there, because they're like people everywhere. They have a God-given ability to learn, to reason. And some discover after coming into the prison system, because they've got the time, that they have a brain and they have a heart. And the work of the chaplaincy was to get them in touch with that, and also to get them in touch with the idea that it's God who has given them those abilities. So use them in a positive way.
So the big goal, I presume, check me out on this, Mr. Johnson. Oh, by the way, you mentioned the lovely Ida. How is the Julia Childs of Lincoln?
Julia Childs. That's more our daughter's.
Yeah, I knew that she'd gone into
yeah, that's more of our daughter's title. She loved cooking. And is not a cook. She thought she'd be a chef one day, but decided to be a clinical psychologist. And so that's what.
That was her daddy's.
There's a little gap there.
Yeah, a little gap.
Goals.
Well, she learned. She learned that cooking is a way to relax for her, and she's an excellent cook. But she uses it as a stress program. When she's home, she likes to get out in the backyard and grill and work on new recipes. And she is, an excellent cook, but her career is clinical psychology. And she's become a specialist in the field of trauma therapy.
Trauma therapy. Now, are you talking about people who had a traumatic experience and bringing them through it?
Yes. Many families adopt children from war zones.
Yeah.
Well-wishing, many Christian homes, and she's found that many of them are just not prepared for the hard wiring that happens very often when the mother's carrying the baby and she's fleeing for her life in a war zone. Those stresses, stressors get imprinted in the brain, and so the child has already, before even being born, set on a course that's traumatic. And then others, with bombs bursting around them and watching people get killed before their eyes, very often people, young people, children, see things that we can't even begin to imagine. And so a well-wishing family wants to adopt them out of that situation, only to realize much later that there's some deep-seated trauma that has to be dealt with. And so Ebony's working with families who have adopted kids out of Eastern Europe, Africa, wherever, Middle East, and helping them to understand the dynamics involved in trauma and how to treat it. But, you don't have to go overseas to deal with and find traumatic situations here.
Yeah, right.
Sex offenses happen in homes because usually that's where the people can get to you. The people who know you best are closest to you. And so, we're dealing with that very issue right here. Violence, whether it's domestic or otherwise, those are traumatic situations that affect everyone, but especially young children.
648-5510. Our guest this morning is Mr. Henry Johnson. Henry is, as I indicated when we came on air, a very well-respected gentleman in our community, and he had a very tough job. Working with prisoners day in and day out has got to be, at best, edgy day. And what you're doing in your capacity as chaplain is administering to these young men, and we have a special chaplain for the ladies' prison as well. I'm trying to think who that is. Anyway, your experience of expertise is at Logan Correctional Center,
yes,
which is the men. Yeah.
Yes.
And of course, I guess it goes without saying that a major part of your goal is to prevent recidivism, which is a terrible problem in the prison system here in the whole country, not just here in Illinois at Logan Correctional Center. Once they get out, for however reason, they need skills that they're not acquiring as a prisoner, and that's part of your expertise, is to counsel with folks in that capacity.
Well, the government at one time gave businesses write-offs, if they would hire an ex-offender. I'm not sure where that program is now, but what inmates need very often is just someone to believe in them, someone to take a chance and give them an opportunity to prove that they are not the same persons that came into the system now that they're out. We had vocational programs in automotive mechanics, horticulture, food service, those kind, and also office skills, working with computers and learning the basics of just doing work processing. There have been many inmates who have gone to college while there and gotten out and gotten jobs. Yeah, and because they came in with skills, they were able to go back out with a different mindset and different direction and find employment. The problem is that we're living in a culture and in a nation and society that doesn't need laborers. Everything's been automated. Robots are replacing, what used to be a job for a man who could work 30 years out at Caterpillar or back in the steel mills where I grew up. But they have automated all of those, not all of, but most of those jobs. And so the workforce just isn't needed like it was 30, 40 years ago. So, our goal, I think, as educators or even as pastors, is to encourage individuals to look for work that, first of all, can't be outsourced, that maybe no one else is doing, that is a service-oriented occupation, and then challenge them to really look for that kind of job, or even be innovators or creators of those kinds of jobs that just simply can't be outsourced.
To have a job and to succeed in that job must be the most wonderful thing that can happen to them. probably having had few successes in their life.
Yeah. Dignity is something we all want. The feeling of being important, valuable, self-reliant, independent, all of that. It's just a desire of human nature. And I want to be respected. When a man in particular cannot work, his dignity is severely damaged.
Very demeaning.
It's demeaning. You're scrapping and scraping and trying to make ends meet. If you have children, how do you feed them on minimum wage? And that's why we have a category in our society called the working poor. They're working 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And then there's this debate of whether or not they should receive a $15 minimum wage. $15 is not a lot of money per hour, especially if you have a family of 4.
If Judy and I are going to get paid here at this work that we do, we're going to have to honor some sponsors so we can get the money in to pay us. Go right ahead, Mr. Rice. We're going to take. You heard that. Right back live in the studios here. The program, of course, is Viewpoint each Wednesday morning at 8:15 to 0900 hours. Our guest this morning, Judy Busby and I really work hard to try to come up with some different guests each Wednesday, and I think we've succeeded very, very successfully, if I may be redundant or something like that. And bringing aboard with us Mr. Henry Johnson. Henry has been a chaplain at Logan Correctional Center for a number of years. Mrs. Johnson, the Julia Child's, I guess Julia Child's mother, has been a teacher at Lincoln Community High School for a number of years, very respected, and they're both retired now, too young for that. But Henry's sharing some experiences that he has not necessarily enjoyed, but part of his career at Logan Correctional Center. Chaplain, that's got to be a tough call. When I was in the military, they'd give you a TS card. You go see the chaplain if you got a problem. That you can't do that today. Different hierarchy. But the chaplain at a prison, it occurs to me, Judith K., that they're on the front line with the word help inscribed above it, because those folks who make it available, make it possible for them to see the chaplain, they're in help. They're in need of help, and you and I, on our daily lives, we need help, and sometimes we don't know where to go. And a prisoner, I can see where that's really important to have a gentleman like Henry Johnson serve in a capacity to advise and counsel and make life a little easier, so to speak. So what you do is a very important thing, Mr. Johnson, as I'm sure you know that, but you're having a definitive impact on individuals, and it's so important that you succeed, because so many individuals go back on the street, so to speak, not well prepared or prepared at all to be amongst the population. So,
well, when inmates first come in to our facilities, they go through orientation. One of my assignments as the correctional chaplain was to go to orientation to talk about religious opportunities, worship opportunities, Bible studies, and counseling opportunities. And I would let it be known that they could come see me at any time. The only thing that was not kept confidential, and I would tell them as far as the chaplaincy staff, is that if they told us anything that was a threat to themselves, another inmate, or the general security of the institution, that kind of information would not be confidential. But if they wanted to talk about, what's bothering them, it may have been their first experience in prison, doing time, or they've got issues with family at home, or self-esteem, or understanding, why this had to happen to them. Where's God in the midst of all of, your incarceration? Those kinds of things, that was kept confidential between me and the chaplaincy staff and the inmate.
Well, Judith and I, we did the storybook program. She's back helping on that, volunteers. That, for the information of our listeners out there, both of them, that for the information of our listeners, it consists of volunteers go out there, and this was under the SOSA's, the jurisdiction of Lutheran Social Services, was it not, Judith K.?
Yes, LSSI, a Lutheran Social Service.
And they bring a lot of books in, and
wonderful program.
The routine is that they spread these books out on tables, and the prisoners have a few minutes time to look at them, and they'll pick up a book or two books, and they'll go back into an area with the volunteer and read to their children and or grandchildren, as the case may be. And I found that to be very fulfilling volunteer work, to hear these gentlemen, and in Judy's case at the ladies' prison, the lady inmates, read to their children and or grandchildren was a very moving thing. I had one gentleman sing the prose, actually sing to us, and I sat there and a tear came to my eye. This was very meaningful to him. So that program out there, as far as volunteering is concerned, I think they probably still need volunteers out there for that program.
Oh, yes.
And I would suggest if you have a minute of your time on the Saturdays, go out there. It's going to take you all morning. And let it be known that you'd like to volunteer for the storybook program. You're making an impact on children.
Yes.
Let me say that first. So
You referenced early on the lack of a father figure in so many
in many of the homes, yes,
anymore. And this gives a man, and when we started out there with Storybook, it was a men's prison, period. There were no women out there. It was 100 years ago, or maybe 96.
Since December of 77.
Was that it?
When the institution first opened.
Yeah. And this gives a father a chance to be present in some greater or lesser degree. And I think that that's helpful to the kids and probably to the father.
Yes. The impact of a father is powerful. And I think we've lost that, but God created men to be, or males to be his representative as father, because God is characterized as a father, but he's also mother. He's also mother. God has both qualities. But he then asks or requires the mother to partner with the father in providing a well-rounded rearing of the child. Women, by and large, supervise that development of a child. God's given women a very special ability to feel, to understand, and even to sense things even before they happen. But God also calls men to be the leader in that process. Okay? Now, women can teach a man to be good people, a good person. They can teach them, kindness and gentleness and responsibility, but masculinity is modeled for young boys by men. Femininity is modeled for young girls. If that masculine element is not in the home as the child grows up, that young boy is going to go find someone that looks like him, that is developing like him. So very often he'll leave home, go out into the street, and he'll find someone that's masculine that he can identify with. That's why it's really important for fathers and for men to be involved in the rearing of young boys. Now, young girls need fathers and male positive role models as well, because what men do is put the stamp of approval on that young girl as she's growing up. But she learns her femininity from mom, or whoever is the female major role model in her life. And so the balance in God's plan is for there to be a father and a mother. In
a perfect world.
In a perfect world. Take father out of the equation, and especially for men, something's missing.
Do you find, Mr. Johnson, that the prisoners with whom you have contact, people who seek you out for counseling and or just plain conversation man to man. Do you find that those prisoners involve themselves in other aspects of prison life, such as you have quite a choir out there, and
for many years,
quite good,
I miss
really.
them.
And do those gentlemen kind of get involved with people, things like your prison choirs and or gardening, other outdoor activities?
Yeah, at we had a horticultural program where they could learn about landscaping, planting shrubs, the difference between certain flowers and what they need to thrive. Those kinds of programs really helped inmates who wanted to pursue a career in that area, but also got them out of the housing unit into fresh air, God's good nature. Yes.
Yeah.
How many, you talked about the woman in the home, and it's necessary that there be one of each.
Yes, and God's plan, yes.
But how many, my golly, homes have just a
Just the
mother?
one.
Oh,
I
substantial.
bet it's scary if you would
If we knew the actual statistic, it would just blow us away.
Yes.
But we know just by common experience that there are many. But thank God for women, because if it wasn't for mama or grandma, there would be no one.
Grandmas. Now that's another issue.
Very often.
There are an awful lot of grandmothers who are raising their grandkids.
Yes.
Or great-grandmothers who are raising the great-grandkids. Now, it's certainly better than nothing, but it's not a perfect answer, surely, because, my ideas of child rearing vary from my kids' ideas.
Yes.
I noted
of child
that.
rearing. Did you notice
Yes, I noticed that right away.
Yeah.
So it's probably not an ideal situation. The best you can do, though.
And when you get to a certain age of life, you get tired. And, there are noise levels that you just can't deal with. The energy levels aren't there. Especially when children are young, that need to play, need to get out, and they are noisy and they're loud, and you've got to keep up with them. And it's I would imagine if I had to take on a little infant or toddler or grade schooler, my days would be spent, sleeping as much as I could. At 70, I don't have the energy I had at 30, but thank God that somebody steps in.
Yes, amen. Amen and amen. My youngest grade is 5, and he's a very good boy. But his grandmother will play dominoes with him ad nauseum.
That's all right, you're teaching
Now, I get
something.
bored with dominoes,
After 100 games.
After 100 games, yeah.
Now, Henry, the state of Illinois, in its infinite wisdom, has managed to do strange things with its money, incomparably strange. But you have to have what's known as a table of organization, and it would be hopeful that the Department of Corrections would have the backing of our legislators and so forth in coming up with legislation that would inure to the benefit of the prisoners insofar as being re-involved in society is concerned, insofar as doing away with recidivism. You'll never do away with that word, but on the whole, if you can avoid that word, then society's a heck of a lot better off. Do you find that in the DOC hierarchy that you get a lot of support in what you try to do in your capacity as a chaplain?
When I was working, before I retired in 2006, definitely so. The Department of Corrections was funded, for our educational programs and recreational programs. At one time, we even had a itinerary boxing and I think basketball team where teams were sent out from institution to institution, which was stopped because the community at large, I think got wind of it, and they didn't see that as a part of rehabilitation, and it was costly, and there had to be some adjustments just because of the sheer cost. But overall, the state worked with the correctional facilities to provide programs that would rehabilitate and do the work of corrections so that inmates went out better than, they came in. Now, what's going on now, as I said, I've been retired since 2006, so I'm not an authority to speak on what is actually going on now. But I know that the state really helped to provide correctional opportunities. I was even able to take choirs from institution to institution way back in the day. And also, sometimes on furloughs, they were allowed to come in and sing locally right here in Lincoln. Now, I'm not sure, but I would say they're not doing that right now. But it was done at one time. But the greatest savings, I think, in terms of just the cost of incarcerating a man or woman, was the volunteer programs, the army of volunteers that came in to help with correctional programs and opportunities where men could, like you mentioned, Storybook, which was an excellent program. We had the Walk to Emmaus Retreat, and I think it's called Great Banquet now, but they would come in at least once or twice a year and then come back for the retreat, and then would come back on the, I think it was the third Saturday of each month to do a reunion. And so we have volunteers teaching Bible classes. And some that came in and provided recreational opportunities. Local softball teams and soccer teams have come in to work with and provide opportunities for the men and women there at the institution. The volunteers, I don't know what the actual dollar amount is, but boy, you save the state a lot of money if they had to hire individuals to do all of those very vital programs.
I was working at the hospital with volunteers for a number of years, and I'm telling you, there's no finer bunch of people in the world than those who volunteer. They have nothing to gain except the satisfaction of knowing that maybe they've made a difference.
And that's worth more than money.
It is. I'd like to ask you a question, and if I'm out of line, I guess you can just smack me down, okay?
My arm's not that long.
Your arms aren't that big,
As a chaplain, would you be reined in? Because things are evolving so quickly we can hardly keep up with ourselves. And now it's religion, generally speaking, isn't as popular as it used to be. And do they allow you to speak of the Bible in the real terms, or do they make you tone it down, or how does it work?
Well, thank God we still live in America.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
There are, First Amendment rights, and of course one of those rights is the freedom of religion. I was never asked to have a review of my sermons before I preached, or my Bible lessons before I presented them, and I can dare say that that's not required yet today, even though I've been gone 13 years. We do have the right of the free expression of religion without interference from the state, federal or local state government. And so I was never ever questioned about anything that I preached. I preached Jesus and Him crucified. Baptized inmates every Sunday, and we had religious Bible studies throughout the week, and they're still going on. Yeah, I'm in touch with some volunteers who still go in. So no, that's fine. Maybe if we were in some other country, but we do have that constant, and I pray to God it's never lost. We don't have to worry about stormtroopers coming in our local churches, like I've heard is happening in China, where they have spies, and you have to be monitored with what you preach. I have some friends from China who are going to school that told me that there's severe persecution. Now that may come, But we will cease to be the United States of America if that happens. We have the freedom of religious expression in our country today, and I pray that we always have it. And
thus
also in
may
our
it
prison
ever be.
systems. Yeah.
Mr. Johnson, in your professional capacity as a chaplain to those who have been judged guilty from whatever crimes, do you feel that at the end of the day you've made a real impact on this individual or that individual just as they get ready to hit the streets, so to speak?
Well, I learned real early that I'm not a messiah.
I'd have told me that.
Yeah, I can't save you. I would tell the inmates, I can offer you tools, a perspective on spiritual life. I share with you what Jesus has done for my life, but you have to decide if that's going to be a value system that you want to embrace. And many inmates have said, "Yeah, chaplain, I'm gonna live for the Lord now. I've made a change in my life, and I'm not coming back." I said, "Well, great. I hope so, but you won't know that until you're back on the street."
That's the problem.
But if you change your environment, change those who are around you, have the greatest influence on you, if you take to heart the covenant you've made with the Lord Jesus Christ right now, you will make it. If you don't, I'll be here when you get back.
Oh, gee.
I would tell them that. The lucky ones made it back. Some were not so lucky.
Yeah.
Because they didn't continue the covenant that they made with the Lord in prison, on the outside. Many of them told me when they went to court, they would pray, "Lord, this is my second, third time. I'm looking at 20 years. Would you talk to the judge and not let him give me all the time he could give me?" And someone would say, he went before the judge, and the judge said, "I don't know why I'm doing this. I ought to throw the book at you, but I'm gonna give you another break." I said, "Well, God's given you an answer to your prayer. Now, what are you going to do in return?"
Yeah.
And they would think about that. But I would also tell them, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, that I would tell them that prison is the only place you ever call on the name of the Lord. He'll keep you in prison because he loves to stay in touch. He knows that God knows the only time you really are concerned about spiritual matters is when you're locked up. Well, he'll keep you locked up. Okay? You have to learn to call on the name of the Lord when you're out there and ask for his guidance daily, and be willing to be obedient to whatever God calls you to do. And there are men out there and women that are doing just that. It's just not newsworthy. You won't read about them in the local newspaper, but they are doing well, I can tell you. Because I stay in touch with them.
About folks who come into our prison system. Those who live on the streets, so to speak, speaking now of major cities like Chicago, Rockford, whatever, they're on the street. They're not a part of the not a part of the society as we know society. Are those folks who come from that environment more difficult to work with as opposed to somebody just coming out of Brookbeck, Illinois?
I'm not understanding.
Well,
explain a little.
The environment of living on the street, that's a tough business. That's a
you mean homelessness?
And are they more difficult to work with than somebody who came from Belleville, Illinois, and was assigned to the prison?
Well, I've dealt with people from the lowest social economic level, and some that came in from western suburb Chicago,
so-called white-collar crimes. If you use a bad
some
expression.
of those, but people who got caught up in white-collar crime, but they were more affluent, and they walked around like they didn't belong in prison, and they couldn't imagine that they were waking up in prison, but they committed a crime like everyone else. Those were the most difficult because they felt self-righteous and they felt like they were above everyone else. I shouldn't be here, even though you committed the same crime as this person from, South Side. You may be from Palos Hills or, some wonderful affluent community like Deerfield, Illinois, but here you are. And so I've seen both types.
I'm sure. I'm sure you've seen a lot of types over the years. Is it any particular group other than these that you say think that they're above it all, that are difficult, and you think in the back of your mind, I don't know if this person can be redeemed?
I don't believe God makes junk. He doesn't give up on anyone, though I think that some people have forfeited the right to live in society.
Yes.
Because of their track record of making decisions that are either destructive to themselves or to someone else. And I've met people that I really would be afraid if they ever got out. But that's a very small majority versus those that I had to ask, what are you doing here with your talents and your abilities to sing, to write? You're a good person. And well, they let drugs, alcohol, and something else become more important, become gods in their life. And that's what they gave their allegiance to. But, when they got away from that, they were just as normal and as wonderful people as you are.
I should think that one of the best things one could do for oneself would be to not go back to whatever town they left.
If possible.
Yeah.
But sometimes that attracts us. So, for instance, addiction, drug, booze, whatever. Addiction is a terrible disease. And when they get out and they're on the street and they're still addicted, although they may think not, but they are. And they slip back into the same old, and the next thing you know, they're right back and you've seen them again.
Yeah.
That's called recidivism at its finest level.
It happens. It certainly happens. But it's the burden, responsibility of the individual. Do you really want to change? Have you turned, using an AA reference, first of all, recognize you're powerless, step one in AA, to overcome your addiction. Now, are you willing then to turn the care of your life over to that higher power? If you don't make that determination, whether you're in prison or not, whatever you give your allegiance to is your God. Is that entity more important than the Almighty God and the Lord Jesus Christ? And God, as you understand Him, it may be for Muslims, Allah, or Jehovah for the Jews, but whatever you give your allegiance to, whomever, is He greater than whatever's dragging you down? If you don't make the decision to really surrender to God, who's all powerful and indwelling, can really, change your heart and your mind, then you continue to make the same mistakes. Or let me say this, adults don't make mistakes. Children make mistakes because they haven't experienced life. Adults make decisions. Okay?
You keep threw me there when you said adults don't make mistakes.
We don't make mistakes. We make decisions.
Yes.
Henry Johnson, retired chaplain of the Department of Corrections, making an impact on society. And I mean that in every sense of the word. The degree of his success oftentimes will determine the future of an individual or that individual's family. So it's a plural thing as opposed to singular. Henry, we thank you very much for spending some time with us today, telling us about your profession. Yes, ma'am. Yes, you want to sign off with something, my dear? I'm getting signals.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute.
I don't think it's...
You're deer in the headlights. Yeah, you're right.
Oh.
You're right.
Yeah. But I want to thank the both of you for your dedication to volunteerism in the correctional facilities, our local facilities, over many, many years. And many like you who have really made a difference in the lives of the individuals there, a great impact. Keep doing what you do.
Well, I have a little saying on my letterhead. It's at the bottom of it. It says, don't go through life with a catcher's mitt on both hands.
That's right.
Throw something back.
Throw something back.
And Judith and I have kind of practiced that business, and we appreciate being able to do so. Yeah. Thank you very much, Henry.
Well, thank you for this opportunity.
We didn't sell any books for your daughter's cookbooks.
She hasn't written one. She's working on a book dealing with trauma right now, but not a cookbook yet.
I have that at my house on a daily basis, because she shipped me one of her early books. Henry Johnson, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Right ahead, James.